we'll work this out. Yes. Okay, we are finally ready to go. I don't know what was causing that.
No worries. Also, in case you missed it earlier, I'm just going to put it again this time for recorded posterity. You should totally make the intro music the opening music from X-Men the Animated Series, and then the outro music should either be X-Men Evolution or Wolverine the X-Men.
It will be X-Men Evolution if I have my way, and I probably will.
You will. You're the guy that edits. Hello and welcome to Blah Blah Comics, Blah Blah Curse Words. I'm Derek.
I'm Colby.
And we talk comics sometimes, and it seems like a whole hell of a lot of the comics we've been talking the last few times have been X-Men related.
Yes, there's been a almost embarrassment of riches here lately with X-Men, and by that I mean there's been one good X-Men comic book.
Right, but it's been coming out weekly, and we've been adoring every single issue of it.
Yes, every single issue keeps on pushing it, keeps on doing interesting things. We just got the introduction of Super Sassy Sinister, so that's... Oh
my god, Extra Bitch Sinister is my favorite thing about Sinister now. I love him so much. It's very much kind of a leftover of the Kieran Gillen run,
yes.
Which I've started rereading since we got the Something Sinister issue of House of X. But yeah, Messy Bitch Sinister is wonderful. I kind of think maybe having been a woman for a while may have had an effect on his mind, and I kind of love that idea. I honestly miss Sinister. I think she was actually a really great and fun take on the character, but most Extra Bitch Sinister is also a delight. So this has been delightful. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, I was gonna say we got just had that happen kind of date where it's happening, but we won't, because of our re-energized love for X-Men. We wanted to talk and kind of redo an old podcast from a long time ago, one of our old favorites, of our personal favorite top 10 X-Men.
Yeah, again, this is something that Blah Blah has done before, and we've also revisited lists before, because times change, opinions change, things change, and also that was before we were a member of the Night Nerd Network. Thank you, Lance, as always, for putting us on the show. So we feel like a lot of our more recent listeners, especially people who've been discovering us on YouTube, there's really no way to go back and check out an old episode like this. So we definitely wanted to refresh it, kind of go back to it, and also just to talk about our favorite Marvel's Merry Mutants. So yeah, with that introduction, I'm just going to go ahead and jump into it unless you had anything else you wanted to add, man.
No, go for it. I think let's jump into it, because I don't know how much we'll have for this, because we've talked a lot about X-Men lately, but any excuse to talk more, I'm down for.
Absolutely. There's a couple of genuinely surprising even to me on my list, and a couple of surprises that eventually kind of dropped off. So, as always, with any list like this, we got to do some honorable mentions. Honorable mentions include Gambit, who was the X-Man who got me into X-Men comics thanks to the X-Men animated series, but who my affection for has kind of cooled as I've gotten older. An X-Man character, an X-character, rarely on the team, was on my list until the last minute. Wolverine was never considered for this list, I'm not going to lie. I like Wolverine, but he's never been a top-tier fan X-Man for me. But Sabretooth was almost on this list. Apparently, I like Wolverine without the morals. And then, mostly thanks to my art partner Derek, who is his favorite character is Cannonball. Cannonball was considered for this list, but ultimately removed. Though honestly, if I had to make a list of my favorite Avengers, Cannonball would probably show up in the bottom half of the top 10 of that. But anyway, my number 10 itself is kind of a surprise. My number 10 character debuted in New Mutants number 98. My favorite take on this character was written by Gail Simone, and their place on this list was solidified by a recent filmatic debut. That's right, my number 10, Nina Thurman, Domino.
Oh,
see what I did there? I totally swerved. Isn't that clever?
You did it well.
I thought about that about 2 hours ago. I was like, oh man, I can't wait to do this swerve. Yeah, the recent Domino series by Gail Simone and David Baldeon was phenomenal. It really made me fall in love with Nina as a character. Plus, Zazie Beetz' take on the character as just kind of a cool, confident, can't really get, bothered by things because things are just kind of going to work out for her. Take in Deadpool 2 made me really fall in love with Domino as a character. I'm really excited when I see her show up in comics. I will say also, Cy Spurrier's run on X-Force had a really interesting take on her Domino power, and yeah, I've just realized I really have a lot of fun when she's in comics. I think she's a really fun character, and I really love following her. So yeah, my number 10 is going to be Domino.
Ooh, I like that one. That's not one I thought would make this list, to be honest. That's actually pretty cool.
Me neither. That was one of my two major surprises. But again, and I really have to say, I think it was Zazie Beetz who solidified it for me. Her beautiful, fun, light take on Domino. And then also, I gotta say, David Baldion's art in the Domino series was fucking incredible. I fell in love with him as an artist on that book. So, it much like Domino's powers herself, everything just kind of went her way to make her a pick on my list.
I like that. I went very different with my number 10, but one you'll appreciate nonetheless. Because as much as I love Domino, my number 10 is actually Sabretooth.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm so glad he made one of our lists.
I always thought, as a kid, I always liked his design in the original X-Men animated series. In the first movie, I really liked him. And also, I just like the idea of kind of a world where you have all these people who fear mutants for being monsters, who fear of stuff. Sabretooth kind of being a character that utterly loved and embraced being a true serial-killing son of a bitch monster.
Monster, that's the key word, yeah. And I think people don't really, like, what am I trying to say? I think Sabretooth's design is undervalued. I don't think people really realize how badass Sabretooth looks in a lot of different situations. Just, he's like 8 feet tall, made of muscle. He's got claws just like Wolverine, but his are, less than 6 inches and are just on the tips of his fingers. Those teeth, that cold, ice cold serial killer stare, and yeah, the fact that he just revels in what he does. He is a man who loves his job, and his job is killing as many goddamn people as he feels like. There's something escapist in that, and yeah, he's again, in a very different way from Domino, I find he's a ton of fun on the page.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think normally Sabretooth's one of those characters where I kind of struggled because there's a few characters that fit this criteria a little bit, because there's the Sabretooth. What made it, because Sabretooth has been on X teams and has been at least affiliated with good guys and has moments where
he was a member of X Factor for a while. It totally counts.
The other one I almost had here, and he has kind of had moments of being good, but I prefer Sabretooth. I feel like Juggernaut can kind of fit the same mold in a way.
But there's a glee to Sabretooth I feel like Juggernaut never really has. Juggernaut is more like Hulk to me, in that he's mostly just if you guys would just leave me the fuck alone and let me rob a bank every couple of months, we'd be fine.
That's true. That's very true. But yeah, but for that reason, Sabretooth was my number 10.
Excellent choice, my friend. Iron Fist number 15 is one of my Grail comics, honestly, because I really, really love the character. Speaking of first appearances, I actually own the first appearance of my number 9 character, which is kind of amazing considering what I paid for it and how old it is. My number 9 is Calvin Rankin, the Mimic.
Ooh.
I'm really, really glad we made this list favorite X-Men and not favorite mutants, because as we all know, the Mimic is not a mutant proper, but he has been an X-Men on and off for years. He's been a member of the Exiles, but I'm going all the way back to the original, holy shit, how do I have these 5 random teenagers' powers? I'm also kind of a dick. Prototype Wolverine, that is Calvin Rankin, the Mimic. I have his first appearance, which is X-Men number 20 from like 1964? I don't know. I found it at a con. I got that and Banshee's first appearance at the same con for under $50, and I'm absolutely bragging here. I am 100% bragging. But yeah, it's a great comic. I just find him a fun and interesting character. They've done some weird shit with him over the years. He went kind of catatonic for a while. He showed up back during the Adam Polina drawn run on X-Force. I want to say that was Jeff Loeb as kind of insane and still somehow managed to maintain the original X-Men powers. He was kind of the I mean, more or less the leader of the Exiles for a while, kind of recast as a more handsome, take charge type in Exiles. Shows up every once in a while to do some fun things. I don't know. He's another character that I'm always delighted when he shows up in a way that I was kind of surprised to admit to myself. And honestly, I really like that original weird-ass orange giant hands and feet, not quite visor costume that he had. Just again, just kind of a delightful character. I like him a lot. One of those weird backup characters that never shows up, but when he does, it makes me smile. The Mimic.
You like that character? Actually, I have a decent jumping on Bruce because I believe I also have the first appearance of my number 9. Actually.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, which won't be as surprising, and is nowhere near as hard to get. But because my number 9, I somewhat, I will say, it's not very similar to Mimic, but we'll say has, I guess, certain personality problems similar to Mimic in a way. My number 9 is Archangel.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, I love Archangel.
Yeah, I'm specifically Archangel. I love Angel too, but Archangel, for me personally, I think the revamp of the character, adding some really weird killer nuance to the background, and that people would explore for literally decades later on and add to it.
Mm-hmm.
I think I think the character Angel is more important to the X-Men, but I think Archangel is more interesting.
Right. Yeah.
And not only from going back from the old X Factor stuff, and of course my love for Remender's Uncanny X-Force, but even every time he's been involved, minus a few weird recent shit from like the weird Uncanny X-Men revamp, where they were just like, he's turned into Archangel again somehow.
And also has his Archangel costume on, despite the fact he wasn't wearing it earlier. That really bothered me. It's dumb, but that really bothered me.
No, it was one of those moments where they really wanted to have this big payoff and this cool moment, but they did not plant the seeds or anything. It was just, got hit with the psychic sword. Now you're Archangel again. How? Reasons.
Yeah.
But before that, of course, having the incredible Dark Archangel saga of just one of my all-time favorite X-Men stories, of just taking that idea of from the old Apocalypse and Age of Apocalypse and Four Horsemen, and just again retooling it and making Archangel into this potentially horrible top tier X-Men level villain if need be.
Mm-hmm.
And really taking that to the nth degree is such a cool thing, and having that dichotomy of still having the Angel, still being the Archangel, the love for Psylocke, the love for the team that he used to be on, but also having these literal inner and outer demons. It's such a very X-Men soap opera almost trope at this point, but I think it's a character that started doing it right before every other character went through a similar phase.
And also, I feel like, and I don't think this is Remender's fault because he handed off the character to creators who didn't know what to do with it. I thought the Redemption Angel arcs that they attempted to do after they Archangeled him in the Dark Angel saga had a lot of potential to be really fascinating, really cool, and then nobody did anything with it.
No, because they started off really fun in like what they were doing in Wolverine and the X-Men, and the problem is, I think that's something that AVX got in the way of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
because they had that incredible Wolverine and the X-Men issue. I want to say where it was Psylocke and Angel coming to teach a class for the first time since it happened, and it had like some really like gut punch moments between Psylocke and Angel.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was right before AVX started and just turned it all on its head.
Yeah, AVX, for better, however you feel about the actual story and miniseries, it completely fucked what Gillen and Aaron were trying to do in their respective books, and completely truncated that what were very clearly supposed to be new launching points and new runs. And admittedly, it did give us Bendis' X-Men, which I hold in much, much, much higher esteem than a lot of people. But it is sad that both of those creators were trying to tell stories that were basically shut down because Marvel decided they needed an event.
Yeah.
I don't have much more to add to that other than, I love Angel. I love Archangel. He did not make my top 10 list as much as some of the other 05 did, but he's always a charmer. And I, too, own his first appearance. So high five first appearance buddies on that one.
You'd be shocked to know, and I own a lot of random, late 80s X Factor shit because of certain characters that pop up a lot.
Yeah, you actually have a first appearance of Apocalypse, and I still don't, even though I've considered buying it several times.
Yep, I have much like with Flex Mentalo, I have that weird collection where it's like, I for some reason have the, Doom Patrol makes more sense, but before I had most of Doom Patrol, I had, the first appearance where it's just, this weird little cheeky cameo, basically, and then the actual appearance.
Yeah.
Because they love doing that shit. It's just who is this weird blue man? It's Apocalypse. Who's that? Find out next issue.
Yeah. Well, and originally it was supposed to be the Owl. So I love that little piece of weird X-Men trivia. They were going to make the big bad of X Factor the Owl. And then I can't remember why that was decided that wouldn't work. It may have even been as much as the Daredevil writers needed Owl for something, and he just wasn't available. I can't remember what it was, but they were needed a villain on the quick. So I think it was Walter Simonson just sketched out a dude and was like, here, we'll figure him out later. And that's the origin of Apocalypse, ladies and gentlemen. Apocalypse is not my number 8.
Oh.
My number 8 is actually my first holdover from our previous list of X-Men. One of my favorite X-Women. Couldn't really tell you why, other than I think she does her dad better than her dad. I really love Teresa Rourke the Siren. I love her screamy powers. I love the ridiculous Scottish accent that Claremont and other writers have given her. I really adored her on the second run of Peter David's X Factor, the post-Decimation X Factor stuff. She's a strong character. She's a strong-willed character. Another one that I love seeing show up. She was one of the women who kind of had a romance going with Deadpool for a while during the Joe Kelly run on Deadpool. And that was, again, interesting to see her bounce off such a different character and the different dynamics that provided. So again, I don't really have a lot of excuse for this other than I just really love her character, and I really love seeing her show up and stuff. She's always exciting to me when Siren comes around. And I think as much as I love Banshee, as much as I love Sean Cassidy, I think his daughter honestly trumps him in power and personality.
Nice. No, I can't really disagree with you on that. I think I'm not as familiar with Siren. I of course, have read in books she's popped up in that I've been reading, but haven't followed her, the character, that much, to be completely honest.
No, totally fair. She's definitely she's never been in main X-Men. She's never been an anchor of any of the main X books, but she's always been a tremendous supporting character in very good runs of ancillary X titles that I've enjoyed. So, I've followed her around the Marvel Universe, just kind of in and out and around, and just kind of fallen in love with her a little bit.
Mm-hmm. You know what? My next character are actually somewhat similar, where there's a time frame where she was very, very, very important to X-Men, and she kind of goes in and out. She's a character who, for some reason over the years, goes from being one of the most important X-Men to one of the most forgotten X-Men.
I think I know what you're going to say.
Oh, well, let's see. My number 8 is Psylocke.
Oh, nope, I was wrong.
Oh, yeah, my number 8 is Psylocke.
I love Psylocke. Not enough to put her on my list, but I genuinely love Psylocke.
Yeah.
And forgive me, I definitely prefer body-swapped Kwannon to Psylocke. I like her as purple-haired, also somehow Asian, still British, still Jamie Braddock's sister. That's admittedly, I came into the X-Men in the 90s, so that was the Psylocke I was introduced to. But my first X-Men comics I started buying regularly was when Fabian Nicieza brought back Quanon in the original Betsy Braddock's body, and I had no idea what the fuck was going on. Was absolutely fascinated by it, and I'm totally derailing your description of this character, so I can talk about how much I love this character. But yeah, Psylocke is an excellent choice.
Oh no, yeah, I love the character. I think, and I'm someone I think visually she has some of the coolest visual powers. Her representation of her psychic abilities was compared to all in a world of books that have millions of psychics. She found a way, and her creators found a way to really, really make her powers unique. And I mean, it's weird to think of all these psychics. The idea of like psychic constructs in the X-Men world. There's only a handful of characters that really come to mind that regularly use that.
Yeah, it's true. And even before the whole psychic knife, psychic katana, let's bring ninja imagery into it, she always had the butterfly thing kind of hanging out over her face.
Yeah.
And that was very cool and unique. And then also, at least as far as the original Betsy Braddock, she dyed her hair purple. Unlike Polaris, who is naturally green-haired. Again, kind of a bit of little nerd trivia. The original English Betsy Braddock dyed her hair purple. Now, as far as Quanon's hair, to the best of my knowledge, that is actually uniquely purple. I don't think she ever dyed it, or I don't think it's ever been established whether or not it was dyed. But for the original Betsy, that was a choice, and I think that's always been just a neat, cool thing about her, for this really prim and proper British lady to have just a streak of punk in her, and that's neat to me.
I'll think her evolution through the years. She's one of the characters that's been allowed to evolve into a very well, for several reasons, like you just mentioned, but the character of her has evolved in many ways, and just who she's become, especially not to just go right back into Remender's Uncanny X-Force, but around, I think that kind of being her peak of a character so far, of really coming into her own and really being able to be pushed to the forefront of a major arc for a while in the modern era.
You had that, but you also, in the 90s, you had her, after she was nearly eviscerated by Sabretooth, she was saved by the Crimson Dawn and kind of had some weird shadow teleportation powers and a new kind of strange mark on her face, and some hints that the Crimson Dawn may have tied her to a greater thing. I actually have the Archangel Psylocke Crimson Dawn miniseries. I regret to say I have not yet read it, so I don't know how that storyline resolves, but it's by Ben Rabb, so I don't assume that it resolved particularly well. But during that time, that's when I really fell in love with Psylocke as a character. I thought that was a lot of fun,
that's the weird thing about that character. It's from, like, one of the characters that was huge in the 90s, and honestly, up until people who were loving comics in the 90s started making comics, she went very quiet for a long time.
She also, come to think of it, Joe Kelly did some really tremendous stuff with her. She, for a while, was the cage for the Shadow King.
Yeah.
Like, no other telepath was ever able to contain the Shadow King. And for a while, it was her. And she stopped using her psychic powers because she didn't want to have his influence. But she was able to use her mental facilities to stop the most horrific psychic monster. Even Professor Xavier had a hard time battling Shadow King, and she managed to contain him. So there are some tremendous Psylocke stories out there that you can hunt down. It's kind of amazing how little we hear about her, considering what an anchor character she can be for the franchise.
She's coming back in the oddest of the new X-Men series.
Yeah, she's in Fallen Angels, isn't she?
I believe so. Which
man, I hope it's good. I don't know.
Fallen Angels, I feel like, and again, this will come out long before that Fallen Angels comes out, but I feel like Fallen Angels could either be the breakout hit or just the utter shittiest book out of the...
Or it's going to be the one that tanks, yeah.
And I don't know which one.
One of the two. Yeah, absolutely. That's why I'm definitely buying the first issue, because it's going to be one of the two, and I want to be there when it happens either way. Okay. My number 7, I don't know. I don't recall if she's going to be in any of the new books. This was the biggest... Holy shit, not only is this character on my top 10 list, she's higher than I ever would have thought her put. And my wife was like, of course she's on your list. I can't believe you didn't know that. My number 7 is Jubilee.
That makes sense, actually.
God damn it! Yeah. It's like, how does everybody know that I love Jubilee except me? No, I love Jubilee. I came into comics into the X-Men comics of the 1990s. I came into the X-Men comics through the animated series. I came into comics just as the Phalanx Covenant happened. I came into comics just as Generation X exploded onto the scene. Of course, I love Jubilee. Mm-hmm. She's an anchor character for so many books and stories that are such an incredible part of my childhood. And she's a beautiful character that is designed beautifully. I love the yellow and pink combo. I love the Bret Hart sunglasses. I love the stupid fireworks power that even she admits is it's useless in any kind of situation other than, mostly performative. I love Jubilee, and I can't believe it's taken me until I was 38 years old in the year of our Lord 2019 to admit it.
Well, what was a year or two ago when we hosted that party, you were even dressed as Jubilee.
I cosplayed Jubilee as a joke, but yes, I've totally dressed as Jubilee before. Absolutely.
That's when we did the Lance of Wolverine and I did Cable.
Yep. In our shitty cosplay, and I absolutely, I called Jubilee too. I was absolutely like, this is what I'm doing. So, yep.
That doesn't shock me.
And it doesn't. Same with Sarah. She's like, you've always been really up on Jubilee. You were always excited to see Jubilee in the movies. You've always been up on Jubilee. And I was like, yeah, I guess so. Even looking back at the shitty '90s Generation X TV movie, I was most excited to see Jubilee in action. And just fuck me. How did I not never admitted it to myself before? I do not know. But yeah, not only is she on this list, she is near the middle in a way that really surprises me.
I will say my next character won't surprise anybody either. A character I keep on. It's shocking. We almost got in the movie, but as with many X-Men movie plot points, got completely dropped. And a character we talked about earlier today. My number 7 is Mr. Sinister.
Lovely.
I love Mr. Sinister. I love the design of the character. I love the weird, eccentric nature. Even before he was quite so sassy. Even when he was the power-hungry one, the still just weird. The weird nature of the character, to the point of you could argue the only power he has is like plot point power of just.
Yes, he has the power of pushing the plot in the direction it needs to go.
Yeah, he does stuff. I guess now he has technically his mutant powers came from Thunderbird now, which why not?
Sure. Question mark.
We'll keep it that way. I'm fine with it.
Honestly, if we get a Sinister Secrets page in every single subsequent issue of every Jonathan Hickman X-Men book, I will be fine with that because those are delightful.
Yeah, no, having the Sinister blog is great. Having the weird, like, oh man, look what this. There's more Summer siblings than we knew about. Like, okay. All that was great. I love the character again. Just over the years, how he's come and gone, but he's been a character that remains. Anytime he shows up in X-Men, having this power, like, oh, shit's gonna get messy for a little bit. It's like, he still is one of the few characters that anytime he's on page has enough presence to where he still feels like a legitimate threat to the X-Men. Even this new issue, being able to outdo Professor X, even though he knows what he's going to do, basically, and still being able to get a little bit of the upper hand.
Weird question. Would you say Mr. Sinister is the Joker of the X-Men franchise?
You know what? Yeah, I've never thought of it that way, but I would say, especially nowadays.
Yeah. Because I feel like that's the description you often give to the Joker, too, which is when we see the Joker, we know shit's serious. And I feel like now when we see Sinister, we know something is afoot because nobody just pulls Sinister out for just a random cameo.
Yeah, no, I think that's very fair, especially with the current state of him. I think Joker is not a bad one, because I think he's a character that, again, he has been used a lot, but he hasn't been easily defeated or outwitted or anything in many books ever. Even going back to, again, the Gillen run, where it's like, oh, this is just what the series is about for like the last however many issues.
Yeah.
That's weird to think. We basically had a Mr. Sinister solo series for like a good chunk of time in that period.
Yeah, it's true. It's kind of insane. And by the way, I own both the first appearances of Jubilee and Mr. Sinister. So. If it's an Uncanny X-Men comic, I probably own it.
Yeah.
Not my number 6, but I probably own most of them. I don't have much to say about Sinister as much as I've already ranted about him on this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Messy Bitch Sinister is giving me life. So, yes, I absolutely agree. We're going to get real obvious and normal and everybody's favorites here for a bit. My number 6 I do not own the first appearance of, but I'm working on it. My number 6 is Hank McCoy, the Beast.
Yeah, no, we are definitely in this point where I think both of our lists are going to get very yeah, this makes sense.
Yeah. I love Beast. I love Evil Beast. One thing that I've talked about recently, there's a Facebook group that I'm on called House of X, and somebody recently made a post about how they weren't sure that Age of X-Men, even though it's so many people's favorite stories, they weren't sure that they agreed. They didn't think it was all that great a story that didn't have a lot of depth. And I argued that I adored it, especially from a character point, in that, in this world, we get to see our characters who they really are. And the examples I used were even raised by Mr. Sinister, Scott Summers cannot countenance injustice. Even in a world where he's allowed to be as brutal as he wants to be, Logan is still an honorable warrior. Even in a world where he's been completely stripped of his humor and his religion, Nightcrawler will still reach out and help those in need. The ones that left off were, unfortunately, it also shows us that, at least at the time, Havoc absolutely does have a huge chip on his shoulder when it comes to Scott, and given the opportunity would probably do something to hurt his brother if it meant pushing himself ahead. And then also it means that the man who once swallowed a completely unknown chemical to keep it out of the hands of other people in the name of science might ultimately not have a lot of a moral compass when it comes to science. And I think the last few years of Beast and X-Men have bared that out in a really fascinating way. I don't necessarily think that Hank McCoy has ever turned into an outright villain in the 616 Marvel Universe, but he's towed that line a lot closer than I think people give a lot of credit for. And I think that's a reflection of who he ultimately became in the AOA. When completely free of the anchors of morality, Hank McCoy can go to some very dark places. And even in a world where he is anchored by morality, he has towed the line. And I think that's a really fascinating, complex character. Yeah. Add on top of that, he's got a great sense of humor. His powers are interesting. I love his dictionary speak. He's an interesting character, and he's been, again, what you're saying, like you were saying about Psylocke, he has been given room to grow in so many fascinating ways. So yeah, I love the Beast. Good guy, bad guy, whatever.
92, and I think you're right. I don't know if it was the first one, but yeah, ever since Age of Apocalypse, and actually Grant Morrison's New X-Men played a little bit with that idea too.
Yeah.
Having that idea of this underlining part of Beast that for science and for what he believes to be the betterment, he is willing to sacrifice more than many think he would.
Yeah, exactly. Or during the Endangered Species story arc, his very first idea after, I can't figure it out, I'm going to go to people that nobody would consider going to, Mr. Sinister, Dark Beast.
Yeah.
The evil scientists. Look, the good scientists aren't helping. What can you guys bring to the table? And he's the only hero who even considered bringing them in.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important story point to talk about, or at least as far as the character goes. He's willing to do the shit some people aren't. And even if it's a moment of hubris, like the first issue of All New X-Men, when he goes and brings the 05 to our time and is justly raked over the coals for it, that is ends justifying the means for him as a character. And I think that would ultimately be Beast's motto as a scientist: the ends justifying the means. So yeah, I love Beast. The end.
Actually, so my number 6. Yes, no, number 5.
No, this is your number 6. I started.
Number 6? Oh yeah. Yeah, no, I can't do simple math. Is also a character I love, and I guess at this point in time, possibly the X-Men that has been in the most issues of X-Books, or close to it, which is, I think, odd to say, but I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's got to be goddamn close. My number 6 is Wolverine.
I was going to say, if it's not Wolverine, you're a liar, because Wolverine has been in everything all the time, everywhere.
Yeah, I think as much as he is, much like Joker or a few other characters, he can very much be overused. I think when used properly, he is still can be such a relatable, interesting, and even in a world full of craziness, a grounding character that can be very well needed at certain points, and had a a very unique perspective that is extremely different than most of the other X members when it comes to just whatever way you want to look at it, but the simplistic, almost blue collar ethic that he has to just like look it down the middle, like we're going to get this done, and this is how we're going to do it, and for better or worse, at having the outcome that it may not always be what he's aiming for, but him always rolling with the punches and always trying to ultimately do what's best for the ones that he's learned to care about. I think it's always a cool story. The problem with him is, again, much like many characters, he has grown so much, but then someone will take him over and he'll be reverted back a decade and a half, and then he'll grow 20 years, and he'll go back. And so he's had a very up and down stuff, but I think when he's at his...
Ironically, it's a very Hulk story role, yeah. People always want to revert him back to the character that they know, no matter what growth he's actually had as a character.
I mean, yeah, because for every Wolverine in the X-Men, you have a Savage Wolverine.
Yep, and that's a very good point.
Yeah, which, again, that's why I love... I think one reason I love Wolverine in the X-Men so much is it's honestly, one of the most logical conclusions to a character's arc that was started 30 plus years ago at the time that was coming out, and yet people, after it was over, a lot just disregarded it.
Which is sad, because you're absolutely right. You're 100% right on that take. Wolverine eventually being the headmaster of a school dedicated to Jean Grey is 100% like and I wonder if that's why people discarded it, because that is the end point of the character. You really don't take him much further than that. And I think since comics are the perpetual second act, they had to pull him out of that, because where do you go from there? It's the perfect ending. It's the perfect happy ending for this character. 2 points I want to make about Wolverine. Like I say, he's not on my list. He's not a favorite X-Men of mine, but I will say 2 things about him. Very complimentary, I hope. One, Wolverine comics are compulsively readable. Yeah. There's something about the character that makes those books compulsively readable. Win, lose, or draw, like character, dislike the character. The books are so easy to read, and I mean that as a compliment. I mean they're so they go down easy, they go down well. They're like comfort food. They're just good, solid X-Men comics. They're even when they're bad, they're entertaining as fuck. And the other thing, I feel like some of the most interesting times in the X-Men history have been defined by Wolverine's absence. Very specifically, again, when I was growing up, I had barely been into comics for like 5 or 6 months when the Fatal Attractions event happened. Wolverine was stripped of his adamantium, and he left the X-Men to go find himself, and he was gone from the books for like 6 years. Or at least 2 years where he was just absolutely absent from the actual X-Men comics. He still had his own series. He made his guest appearances in other comics, but he was gone from the book for a couple of years before coming back. I say 6 years because he was out without adamantium for 6 years, but he was back on the team with Bone Claws after a while. But he disappeared for a while, and his absence echoes across those issues. You can feel the lack of Wolverine in those issues, and that's really fascinating because there's so few characters that have that kind of impact that when the impact isn't there, it's missed. And that is the feeling I get about Wolverine, is I know when he's not there.
It's very interesting. Out of all the X-Men that were added later and later, I was still to this day think if you were to just poll average day people if they could name the original 5 X-Men, I wonder how many would put, even of course, obviously knowing he's not there, but how many would just automatically in their brain assume Wolverine and possibly Storm were in that
I was going to say Storm would be the other one, yeah.
Because, honestly, they are, for how vastly different those characters are from where the X-Men began. A world of X-Men without Wolverine or Storm seems completely unimaginable now. That's my just kind of off topic, but on topic with the MCU talking about where they do X-Men, and a lot of people want to think, well, we got to start with the original 5 and go forward. I agree, but I also disagree in the sense of once we know Wolverine exists, and because we're 2019, we know Wolverine exists. it seems like a lot of that is just biding your time until you inevitably know he will show up.
Right, exactly. Yeah, while I disagree with the X-Men universe making Wolverine the central character around which everything circles, he's also integral to the team aspect. Yeah. I agree.
That's why I think my personal opinion on that stuff, bite the bullet and just have him on the team, just because that way you won't be people just waiting. It's almost like the equivalent of a band that wants to play their big hit 3 songs in, so it's like, hey, you heard it. If that's all you're here for, it's here.
Yeah, actually, I remember when I saw Bongos, Bass, and Bob, the one time they came back together for one show in Lubbock because their songs were being played on our college station. They opened and closed the show with Thorazine Shuffle. So it was like, if you came here to hear Thorazine Shuffle, here it is. If you want to hear our other stuff, stick around. But if you came here to hear that one song, boom.
Yeah.
And then they closed, they played it again. They're like, thanks for having us out. We're going to play that song, again. So, yeah, I absolutely get that.
That was like... when I just saw Smashing Pumpkins, they opened with the first 3 songs they played were Today, Zero, and I think it was either Bullet. Yeah, I think Bullet was 3rd. So
wow. Yeah, that was definitely a 1, 2, 3. If you guys aren't hardcore, you can leave now. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was pretty. And I was like, okay, yeah, no, we got it. I feel like that's what you need to do with Wolverine. Someone like Wolverine is. You
really want to do like a Pride of the X-Men or a Night of the Sentinels where you bring in a new X-Man, but you have the established team and Wolverine's on the established team. I absolutely agree.
I'm still mad that we have not had like a full-on Sentinel X-Men movie.
It's true. And I love Days of Future Past, but we still haven't had a real Sentinel movie.
Yeah, no,
that's absolutely true.
Moments of Sentinels, but not like...
I hate to say that Storm is also not on my top 10 list, and I think it's because I really appreciate Storm, and I can't imagine the fabric of the X-Men without her, but she's not a favorite character, and I hate to admit it.
No, yeah, I'm about the same way. I appreciate her. There's a few characters like Storm and Dazzler and a few others where I really appreciate, but for me personally, they just have never been a favorite.
Right, agreed. I feel the same way about Dazzler. I like her a lot. I have her first appearance, but yeah, she's a fascinating character, a solid character, not a favorite.
I do have shockingly, I'm looking at right now. I do have the Venomized Storm Pop looking right at me though. So that's
adorable. That's cool.
Yeah.
My number 5 favorite character though, again, do not have a first appearance of, and he is a favorite character. Again, a character that I feel like has had a chance, especially in the last few years, thanks to Brian Michael Bendis, to really grow and change and become someone interesting and new. My number 5 is Bobby Drake, Iceman.
Ooh, yeah, that's another character that's definitely had a ton of evolution in the past 5 years.
Yeah, but I mean, what's so wonderful about it is it's evolution that makes total sense. Because, one, Bobby's dad is an anti-mutant bigot, so it really kind of brings that the X-Men as a representation of a minority to really sharp focus, that this, white college-educated accountant of a kid can still have parents who, hate him, disown him, that have made multiple attempts at reconciliation. Even before the actual homosexuality came out, that really just reinforces and kind of backs that idea. Plus, Bobby has always had just shit luck with the ladies, which is hilarious considering he's a super charming college-educated white dude. You'd think he'd have had like a Dory Evans or, somebody, a Frankie Ray, somebody comparative to Johnny Storm's string of one-night stands to kind of hang his hat on. And yet, again, 30, 40 years before this was ever quote-unquote retconned, dude never had a serious girlfriend. He was never contemplating marriage with anybody. He never, he'd go out on double dates, and, he never, it was just never a thing for him. So that's that so-called retcon that came out of nowhere. Actually, there's a lot of X-Men history that kind of says, no, this makes total sense. But beyond that, Omega level mutant, awesome powers, great personality, great guy to have on the team, funny, fun, delightful, fits in with so many characters. Just a genuine joy. I love Iceman. I'm not playing.
Yeah, that's true. Iceman is a very fun, very cool character. Cena Grace, friend of the show, has.
That's true. made his Marvel bones on Iceman for better or worse, considering how Marvel treated him. But yeah.
But I know Lance is a huge fan of that run. And a run that I know a lot of people really dig. A character that, again, has really, in a lot of
really
ways,
responded to,
Yeah, and that character's coming to his own in a lot of ways, and it's really cool to see characters that are decades and decades old kind of finally find their moment. And
I will say, I rarely talk about this. I dabble in AO3. I don't post a lot on Archive of Our Own, but I do a little bit of fanfic, and Bobby Drake has been the most fun character to write. I've done a couple of pieces of X-Men fanfic for Archive of Our Own, and always Bobby Drake is both the easiest and most enjoyable character to give voice to. I have a blast every time I'm writing him. So just a little bit of a nerd insight about me there.
Ooh, very nice. Nothing wrong with that. I will say the next character on my list, my number 5, if anyone ever wants to give me an X-Men book, this is the number 1 character I want to write, because I think it's a character that for a while the entire X-Men universe literally revolved around, and in the past 3, 4, or 5 years even, no one has known shit what to do with her. But one of my all-time favorite characters, number 5 for me, is Hope.
I feel like Cy Spurrier did really interesting things with her in his X-Force run, and then no one knew what to do since.
Yeah, literally, I was like, from the Messiah Wars to that, I think there's an interesting arc, although I think AVX kind of botched a little bit of, it's like they didn't want to...
Of course it did, it's AVX.
They didn't, it's like, they had this Hope Messiah thing finally go up to, this is their moment, but they didn't want to completely give her that moment, so they found a way to be like, yeah, it's kind of her moment, but not really.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay. That was a weird thing about AVX. It was like, the entire middle of that book is like her going to like, with Iron Fist and training and all this stuff. And then it's like, she kind of helps and maybe she kind of makes him, Cyclops, see Jean Grey, maybe? So...
She reignited the mutant powers of the world.
Yeah.
That was her big moment. She was the Messiah in that she reversed Wanda Maximoff's declaration.
Yeah. And it's a cool thing, but it's also like, okay, since that was fulfilled, they have not known what the fuck to do with her. And like I said, you just mentioned Cy Spear, the X-Force, the Cable in the X-Force and the other X-Force, they did some interesting stuff with her there. And...
They made her bad, except not during Rosenberg's recent run. That was really confusing and weird, and again, very tone-deaf to Hope's character.
Zach Thompson, Lonnie Nadler gave her an incredible issue with Jean Grey with the Cable deaths issue.
Yeah, that's right. That was like a memorial death issue for Cable after extermination. Yeah,
that Thompson and Nadler did, which was an incredible little thing. That's the last time that.
And also, really... Thompson Nadler did that 5-issue Cable run that had Hope as kind of a central character, and it made me realize that Cable works as a father in the same way Superman works as a father. Like, it finally clicked the character of Cable for me. I finally fell in love with Cable as a character because he is a dad, and I am now old enough to be a dad, and I really associate with him in that role. So she was a key part of that too. Yeah.
For a while there, had her own series with Generation Hope that I actually really liked. There's a lot of potential for this character that I think has not been tapped into. And I'm hoping that somebody does, and hopefully it doesn't take as long as certain people took with like Cable or other people to actually get to the heart of the character.
I wonder, I'm very curious to see what, if anything, Hickman does with her. Because I feel like she has to have some kind of appearance or presence during his upcoming X-Men run. We'll see.
I really hope so, because I think someone like Hickman could really add that next stage to her as a character and take her, especially with the weird state of Cable right now in the comics. I think it'd be a very ideal time to put her in a place of growth and possibly power. I don't know, though. Well, again, we'll have to see. X-Men are in still such a weird, semi-fragile state of having basically 5 years of dormancy of nothing really important happening.
Yeah.
That we're still kind of recovering.
Everything post Secret Wars, we're desperately trying to right the X ship again, but the X ship's been completely underwater for years.
Yeah. Yeah, my number 5, Hope. I love Hope. Hope is a character I love and adore. There are 3 characters in particular that I was like, if I ever had the chance to write X-Men, those are characters where I would 100% kill to write, and Hope is one of them.
Nice. I don't know if I could write my number 4 character. I love her. She is my favorite X-Woman. She's the highest X-Woman on the list. But I don't know if I have the skill to write Emma Frost, the White Queen. I love her. Man. I've loved her since Grant Morrison's run. I loved her before Grant Morrison's run. I loved her on Generation X. I loved her when Scott Lobdell had her take over Iceman's body for a while and open up his power set and make him realize what his powers are capable of while she was finally breaking down and mourning the loss of the Hellions. I love Emma Frost. I love the fact that she used to be just an outright spiteful bitch evil woman, and now she is an outright spiteful bitch X-Man. And it didn't really, again, it makes so much sense that she would eventually join Xavier's cause, because ultimately she's always been trying to do it for the children. She tried to do it on her own with the Hellions. That failed. The next logical step is, I don't want any more children to die on my watch. I guess I'll have to join up with you for that to happen. She's beautiful. She's smart. She's a better match for Cyclops at the point where Cyclops wasn't his life at the time it happened. I kind of think Psyche and Jean have kind of refound each other again, but they were together at a point when Cyclops needed her.
I've said it a million times, but I do think Cyclops and Emma Frost and Wolverine and Jean Grey are much better pairs.
I'm okay with that. Yeah, she's the diamond skin thing is wonderful. The high level telepathic powers, the fact that she's kind of adopted the cuckoos who ended up being clones of her anyway. The fact that here lately she's been affecting a British accent, even though we all know she's not, in a very Madonna-like fashion. Everything about Emma Frost is great and kind of perfect. And even when she kind of went bad again through some horrible plot contrivances of Death of X, at least she came out on top and became the Black King for a while. I don't acknowledge Matthew Rosenberg's run for her. But yeah, everything about her is great. Everything about her in the current House of X stuff is very on point, non-character for her, of course, because a lot of House of X is influenced by the Grant Morrison New X-Men runs. That makes total sense. Yeah, I basically love Emma Frost, and again, I don't know if I have the stones to write her. I wish I did, but I don't think I'm a good enough writer to tackle her.
Yeah, the problem with her, you've had everyone from. You had there was like a good decade where it was like Grant Morrison, Joss Whedon, Warren Ellis, right? Warren Ellis had her on his team, on the little thing he did, right? I think.
I don't think he did.
You know, I can't remember.
Mike Carey did.
It might be who I'm thinking of. I just remember the really weird art style in Africa. That's all I remember.
Oh no, you're thinking of Peter Milligan.
Yes, that is who I'm thinking of. You are correct. I knew it was one of those like handful of writers that always make stuff.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. No, that was post the Chuck Austin post Grant Morrison run. Yes. That was during Golgotha and Wild Hunt and all that with Salvador Larroca art.
Yes. Yeah. No. Anyway, point being,
just watch me dropping nerd truth bombs here all over the place.
Oh yeah. There have been some incredible writers to have some groundbreaking stories with her, so I don't blame you for being like, I don't know if that's one I could really want to delve too deep into right now.
Yeah, there's too, again, like you said, there's too many people who've had their finger, and I mean even going back to her creator, Chris Claremont.
Yeah.
That's a man I met recently and got to discuss X-Men with for a while, and that made me deliriously thrilled. Also, I do own him, his first appearance, obviously. So
this will not shock you. I also own this. My number 4's first appearance. And also not as hard to find. But my number 4, a character I would gladly write, even though he just had a character-defining event of his own. My number 4 is Nate Gray, the X-Man.
I expected him to be a little bit higher.
We're the next. It's impossible. The next several characters are kind of all pretty much from 6 forward, are kind of interchangeable, to be honest.
Fair, I get it.
Yeah, I love Nate Gray to death. I love the weird kind of culty, messianic, spiritual. Is he good? Is he bad? Is he the savior? Is he not? And of course, love to death that Nadler and Thompson totally went into the weird. Uh, Charles Manson meets Jared Leto meets Stalin approach to him.
That's a fantastic comparison.
He's had some incredible stuff here lately. I'm very glad that he's kind of, in a weird way, that he got to be the. We got, at least for me personally, I've had several great months of X-Men because I just pretend like nothing else exists except for Age of X-Man and House of X and Powers. And as a bridge back into the world of X-Men, it was a great time. Why just pretend like everything else didn't happen?
Headcanon is a real thing, my friend.
Yeah, well, especially with Age of X-Men being its own self-contained thing, it's very easy to be like, there was no Uncanny X-Men coming out at the same time. You're crazy.
I just read Prisoner X #1 on Marvel Unlimited, and I have questions. Yes. Mostly, why would you have a prison set up in what is supposed to be a utopia? But I'm very curious to find out why that's the case. It definitely does not break the faux reality to me. Also, a minor brag here. I'm pretty sure I own more X-Men issues than you because I recently bought a bundle collection of his entire first series run.
You're definitely close. This is where we're gonna have to, if we get splitting hairs here, if we include the like supplementary series he was in and like spin-off teams and shit.
That's fair. And also I didn't buy any of the Age of X-Men stuff, which you did.
That's also true, in fairness, because that was 4 months of just a lot of X-Men shit.
Yeah, I skipped it for financial reasons, and I don't regret it, but I am enjoying reading it on Marvel Unlimited. Yeah, one thing I love about X-Men more than anything, I just think, as 90s as it is, I love his design.
Oh, yeah.
I love it. I love his look. His original jacketed, rogue hairstyle, one eye always blaring because he just contains so much power and is probably going to die before his 21st birthday. That look, that Steve Scorsese design look, fucking love it.
Yeah.
And I'm about probably 15, 16 issues into his initial run, and it is a goddamn mess. Jeff Loeb is doing his best, but every single issue is just basically, I'm trying to find my way in the world. This person might be trying to help me find. No, they're not actually trying to help. They're attacking me. They know Professor Xavier somehow, and that's bad for some reason. Oh wait, no, they were actually trying to help me. Oh well. Hulk music wander off. Dun,
yep.
dun, dun, dun. Next issue, same thing, but it's also weirdly entertaining. Also, Trinity is great.
Also, the amount of art changes throughout his series is a flabbergasting odd thing. And not just like changing art of like, oh, this is kind of different, but the amount it goes from like, we'll have a couple, especially towards the end there, where it's like very traditional comic style, very bubbly cartoony style, almost anime style, and it's back and forth for a while. Yeah, it's weird, it's crazy. A character that for a long time they didn't know what the fuck to do with. He popped back up.
And yet they kept publishing his book, and it's weirdly entertaining. I actually, I've bought 3 bundles from my comic book store of complete runs of X-Men or X-Men comics because they were the comics I wish I'd bought when I was a kid and couldn't afford, and they are X-Men, Cable, and Generation X, and I love that I own them. I really, really do.
See, it'll pop a little bit in coming up too, but when I was younger, if anything had Nate Gray, Apocalypse, or Cable on the cover, that's all I would buy. I didn't and Mr. Sinister too, in fairness, but if anything else, I just didn't care about. I just go through old back bin issues, and that's all I would do. If they had them on the cover, I would get it. So my reading history up until the age of like 10 was just a bunch of random Age of Apocalypse, Ages of Apocalypse, X-Men stories, Cable stories, execution stories, all that kind of just weird, like, okay, stuff goes on here.
That's hilarious and fascinating. But I get it. I totally get it. For me, it was just the X books. If Uncanny X-Men and X-Men were my books, and if they had a crossover issue or something happened in another book that affected those books, I would buy that. But for the most part, it was just those were my books. And there were some books like I said, I bought issue 5 of X-Men after the 4 issues of Age of Apocalypse, and I was like, man, I really wish I could afford to keep going with this, but I don't have the cash to keep up with this. But I remember always when I was a kid being like, I wish I was buying that. I wish I was buying Generation X, because I bought the first issue and I loved it. And then Cable was one of those books. Cable and Wolverine were the 2 books that were always crossing over with X-Men.
Mm-hmm.
Just always. So I ended up with a lot of random Wolverine and Cable issues anyway, regardless. Anytime there was a big crossover event, you were guaranteed Wolverine and Cable were a part of it.
Yep.
So I ended up with a ton of those anyway. Never bothered to go back and collect all of Wolverine. I have all of his essentials, so I don't really need to. But it did kind of make me be like, I kind of wish I followed Cable throughout all of that anyway, because his story intertwines with the X-Men so much regardless.
Yeah, it's insane. Well, that's the one bad thing about reading through a lot of Cable stuff in trades, especially if it's trades that don't have the entire story outside of the Cable issues. It's insane the amount of books he crossed over in. Any X book, from X-Force to X-Factor to X-Men, Uncanny X-Men. He was a crossover machine from 1991 to 2004. Or whenever that Soldier X launched. 2002. Maybe.
Yeah. That's exactly right. That's very true. So yeah, it's a kind of a continuity mess to keep up with, but also kind of fascinating and really enjoyable. But yeah, we went off on a huge topic. I'm sure we're going to talk about Cable more here in a minute from you. But that was your X-Man at number 4.
Yes.
Okay, so talking about characters we would love to write, my number 3 is probably my number 1 character I would want to write, but he's my 3rd favorite X-Man character. I feel like I want to cosplay like this guy. I love his power. He's another one that I've really enjoyed writing in my little X-Men fanfic. Jamie Madrox, the Multiple Man.
Ooh, yes, I was waiting for him to pop up.
Yeah, I love Jamie. I love him so much. I love the trench coat. I love the stupid shirt. I love his multiple man power. I love that they later made it that each power is kind of a different aspect of his personality or what he's thinking at the moment. I love the idea that if you kill the prime dupe, another dupe just takes over as the prime dupe, kind of like a beehive that just grows a new queen. I love the misadventures and the kind of fucking it up until you get it right and trying anyway attitude. I love X-Factor investigations. Again, much like Emma Frost, I love everything about Jamie. He's a delight. Not my favorite X-Man for a couple of reasons, but there's absolutely a reason he's number 3. And by far, the X-Man I would write a solo series of, or put in the lead of a team that I would want to do a book on. Yeah, I don't have much to say beyond that, other than Jamie's kind of a perfect character.
That's fair. That's everyone on the world will disagree with me about this next one, but that's almost exactly how I feel about my number 3.
I think I know who this is.
Oh yeah, I think I love this character. That, again, the character that I honestly, when I was younger, pretty much got me into X-Men proper, of like a series that I want to watch. And definitely was something that got me excited to watch different X-Men Evolution episodes, X-Men Anime Series episodes, and in recent years has had the oddest revival that I never saw coming. My number 3 is Apocalypse.
That is not who I thought you were going to say. That's really interesting.
Yes.
You've juggled your list a little bit.
A little bit here. But Apocalypse Now, officially on X-Men teams, which is kind of odd, because that's like the one character I legitimately for a long time thought you would never in any way see on actual X-Men teams of any kind. Yeah, no,
he's the epitome of evil for a lot of X-Men and a lot of reasons.
Going kind of for a long time, he was what we talk about Sinister, reverse of Sinister. He was that same thing of, man, if he popped up, things were going to be bad, possibly for years for the X-Men.
Yeah, shit was hitting the fan.
In a way that was just like, okay, this is if we want to compare Sinister to Joker, then Apocalypse in a lot of ways you could definitely say being the Doomsday of X-Men.
Yeah.
Of just, if he popped up, I know you can probably argue Dark Side may be more obvious of a comparison, but I think as far as, especially for the Age of Apocalypse event of just fucking everything up forever for a long time
Yeah.
in the comics, for better or worse, that was him. And, well, technically, we won't get into all the Professor X's son stuff, but I say Legion is a character I really do like too, but I feel
Legion
like
is interesting. He had a wonderful TV show. I'll give him that for sure.
a wonderful TV show, and also oddly enough, the most important part of Age of Apocalypse that everyone forgets was even involved in Age of Apocalypse.
Yeah, that's because he ceased to exist when the Age of Apocalypse happened. So.
What a weird writing moment, by the way, to like write a character off like that, to make it the most important one, but then also make an event that's so long, by the time it ends, most people had just forgotten that he was involved to begin with.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just like, okay, that was there. But anyway, going back to Thompson and Nadler, really on that. Well, actually, first we can go back to I'll lump them together because I also love Genesis, the clone of Apocalypse that is pretty much just a good dude, good little kid X-Man growing up in the X-Men world. What Rick Remender did, I thought was very interesting, and Genesis going over to Wolverine and the X-Men, to some of my favorite moments on that book.
He was sweet. I kind of forgot he existed because he disappeared.
Yeah, another character that Wolverine and X-Men set up a new generation of X-Men that to this day people just don't touch really, and I don't ever know why.
Which is weird because we still get like Rockslide and Annalie and Blob Herman, but we don't get Edie and we don't get Genesis, which is really strange.
It's very odd. But anyway, Apocalypse and Genesis being characters I love the idea of, especially going back to the ideas of X-Men, being symbolized overall of these greater things, whether it be racial inequality, bigotry, all stuff. I always thought it was a very interesting thing of having the survival of the fittest thrown in there too, of having this just alpha not necessarily giving a shit about any of that, but also turning that into its most toxic form of like, I don't care about your race, sex, gender, anything, as long as you are stronger than everybody else in your race, sex, and gender.
Right.
I always thought that was an interesting twist for the X-Men world, and it's one that's also odd because I feel like we got the like very over the top big action movie, sci-fi movie of the '90s. I kind of wish, and I'm excited like that Apocalypse is somewhat involved in Hickman's world. I like the idea of getting the more subtly nuanced version of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if we get even a little bit more taste, kind of what we got a little bit so far in House and Powers of this Apocalypse.
It's definitely touched on in Powers in a very interesting way. Just the idea that even somebody like Wolverine can go along with Apocalypse if given the right kind of motivation and put in the right situation.
Yeah.
As Moira's ninth life has given him, it's definitely added another layer of complexity to the character that I'm really appreciating for sure.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's the weird thing. So now we kind of, and I'm sure Hickman's done on purpose, and I'm sure that's why Apocalypse is on teams, but we, in a weird way, will now, whatever happens, have Apocalypse to thank for the X-Men coming back.
In at least one version, for sure. Which
is, I love, and also going back to the Thompson Nadler Age of X-Men, them being geniuses and flipping Apocalypse into, well, if the world was this way, how would the character be? And it's like, oh, this would probably be a radically different version of the character, because everything the character stood for got flipped on its head. So having the kind of hippie, Beatles-esque Apocalypse.
And then also having that still standing as something as against what Nate Gray stands for, which is what it was intended to be. Just, he has to be Nate Gray's opposite. Mm-hmm. So if Nate Gray has set himself up as, a very platonic, the ideal society has no sex, then Apocalypse has to be a guy who fucks.
Oh, yeah. He is taking Apocalypse being a completely poly, open every way to everything, having a great time, trying to include everyone in a loving society, trying to grow it all up, having that, and now whatever Hickman's going to do, and again, seeing that we know Apocalypse is involved in straight-up X-Men teams from solicitations, which is mind-boggling, but I'm very excited for.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, Apocalypse's character, I love Adore. I also love just a weird, crazy design. So many of his designs too. I love fucking from Age of Apocalypse to the original Big Blue A design to some of his more subtle designs from like Uncanny X Force, his involvement in some of the Cable stories, and even like the really bizarre shit like Cyclops and Phoenix Adventures.
Yeah, yeah. I read the Apocalypse versus Dracula miniseries, which is ridiculous and bonkers and kind of terrible, and I kind of loved it.
Yes, like that. Yeah, there's so much stuff, and also again, I love the idea of having the first mutant of like what was the first mutant. And it makes sense of a man. It would have to be something that really made this impactful gene pool thing, and much like actually, you know what? Very similar to Dracula in the Blade movie. We also got a shit Apocalypse version.
That's true.
That was like, man, they took the core concept of this character. And really
just shat all over it. Yeah,
really didn't understand it beyond. Oh, he can turn people into sand sometimes.
I bought The Rise of Apocalypse as it was coming out, and that was Kavanaugh, Terry Kavanaugh, and Adam Polina were the creative team, and I bought it when I was a kid. I remember reading it as a kid and really liking it. I'm very afraid to go back and reread it now,
very
because I'm sure it doesn't hold up. But I remember being fascinated by the character as a child and picking up that miniseries and really adoring it.
It is, I will say, super wordy.
Yeah, because that's the kind of writer he was. He was also one of the main writers on Spider-Man during the Clone Saga, so if that tells you anything.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So my number 2 character, I would argue, might be the most important X-Man in terms of visuals, in terms of character, in terms of who and what he represents. He's not my absolute favorite, but I would argue that he may be the most important addition to the franchise. And yes, I do own his first appearance. Kurt Wagner, the Nightcrawler.
Oh, that's a good choice.
I mean, he is a lot of people's favorite character, and deservedly so. He's brilliant. His design is brilliant. It's one of those perfect Cockrum designs that really hasn't changed in the nearly 50 years he's been in existence. He's a beautiful character. I'm really glad Claremont quickly walked away from the sad Frankenstein monster take of Lin Wayne's giant-sized X-Men and took him into more of the Errol Flynn swashbuckler type very, very quickly. I mean, what can you say about Nightcrawler that people don't already know? I really do feel like it behooves me to say that he was a brilliant and necessary addition to the X-Men world. The idea that there's a character that looks inhuman, that still fights for humanity, that still loves humanity, and can laugh the way that Nightcrawler, and find joy in the world the way that Nightcrawler does, I think are all incredibly important aspects, and really grew the X-Men as a concept beyond the strangest teams of all that we met with the original 5.
No, I agree. I think Nightcrawler's right up there. We mentioned Wolverine and Storm earlier. I think he's another one where if you throw in that secondary and third groups of people, I think Nightcrawler and like Colossus would be, I think, the immediately after Storm and Wolverine. It's like, oh, they weren't always there?
Right. All of whom appeared together, and all of who joined the team in Giant Size X-Men #1. So yeah, Wolverine and Storm are like definitely like how are they not original characters? And then I'd say that Nightcrawler and Colossus are definitely up there for the secondary. But that's because that was the team that so many people grew up on as the 70s pushed on into the 80s. A lot Nightcrawler, Colossus, Wolverine, and Storm never really left. They always were kind of the heart that the other new characters in the 05 kind of came in and out and passed around on. Cyclops was there for a lot of it, but not all of it. He made his he made his exits and entrances. The other 05 went off and did other things, came back occasionally. The new characters came in and bounced out, in and out as they wanted. But Cyclops, Nightcrawler, Wolverine, and Storm, those were Claremont's characters, and those were the ones that he used the most. So they're all brilliant and wonderful characters in their own way. But again, I feel like Nightcrawler is the most important for what he represents both visually and as a character to the franchise.
Ooh, I like it. I will say I like it a lot. So my next one is not. I will argue. I will admit, probably not as important to the X-Men world.
I think I know who your number 2 and number 1 are. I just don't know what order you're going to say.
Yeah, they're no. The order is hard. The order is very hard because for a lot of reasons. But I'll go this way for now. Yeah, my number 2, someone who is very, 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 very recognizable to the X-Men world, but and possibly as important, but arguably definitely not as important, but to me as important. Number 2, I'm going reluctantly with Cable because he could be number 1 very easily.
Yeah, I figured, which means I know exactly who your number 1 is, and I know who your number 1 is because it's for the same reasoning that my number 1 is my number 1.
Cable is a character I love and adore. I've made no secret about that. A character that, even from the just weird, he's just Terminator copy in the early days, all the way to a loving time bandit father, to everything in between. He has had a very weird character arc from his beginning to his multiple deaths now. He's had a extremely interesting place in the X-Men, from just the typical almost monster of the week moment to the constant bad things are coming warner of the future, to someone trying to stop things, to I think really coming in. I don't think really came into the character that I love, honestly, and probably until the Messiah Wars. So I think that's
that's pretty late in the character's history, man.
Well, I love Cable to death, but I think that is where the character truly becomes something. Goes from being just a fun character to read for me to think something special. I think the idea of him, from the, I always loved this like 3-pronged war that was going on in the Messiah Wars, of having the, you have all these different things, and at the heart of it, you have Cable protecting Hope, and him really growing to this character of, I'm going to protect this little girl and let her grow up to do it. And much like how he was raised, try to make this girl better than his life was, but also being mercilessly hunted throughout it all. Finding himself in her and really being able to identify, she is my daughter. She may be, through weird, traditionally anything involving Cable in the Summers, like, not actually my daughter, but she's my daughter, type of stuff. I think that's where the character really becomes. Going back to Thompson and Nadler, adding that anchor to that character, I think is really what grounded Cable and turned him from a character that was just a cool, I'm gonna show up and beat all the Avengers just to warn you that you're gonna fight the Avengers soon. My technovirus is taking over. It's gonna kill everybody if you don't stop me. Kind of character to a character that really had a lot of depth and a lot of understanding beyond just the hardened old veteran.
Right. I've already talked about it a little bit on here when we discussed the X-Men, because we had a horrific sideline, as we usually do. Go out and read Cy Spurrier's X-Force run and the Thompson and Nadler final issues of Cable's last series, and I think they'll really illustrate what an impressive and interesting character Cable actually is. If you want to know why Colby and I think so highly of Cable as a character, I think those 2 arcs, and also I'll throw in the Messiah Wars in there too. Those are the arcs that I feel like really define him, and also just tell really cracking good stories.
Yeah.
So hunt those down. They're very much worth your time. All of it's available on Marvel Unlimited if you have a Marvel Unlimited subscription.
I was going to say, there's not a lot of competition for this, though. I was going to say that Second Coming is still my favorite X-Men event of the past 10 years, but then I realized we're not saying a ton.
I hated Second Coming. I'm so sorry.
I know you did. I know, but I'm still saying, even as someone who hated it, I feel like there's not a lot of competition for best X-Men event of the past.
I liked Battle of the Atom.
I was about to say, Battle of the Atom.
I wish Bendis had been allowed to do something with the time traveling X-Men characters, because I think that's a really good twist.
I'm really trying to think. There's a lot of shitty shit. Black Vortex.
There's a ton of shitty shit. Black Mirror was garbage. The Trial of Jean Grey wasn't great. AVX is
a hodgepodge.
Enjoyable trash.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a hot mess of trash, but at least it's fun.
It
doesn't have the anchor that either Battle of the Atom or, for that matter, Second Coming have.
Yeah, it starts off way stronger than it should, and then it gets so muddled, and then kind of just has an ending that's like it had like 3. I remember there's like 2 great. There's probably 6 great issues in that huge event. And even if you just boil it down to 12 main issues, there's like 6 good ones. But there.
And also, I hate Second Coming because it killed Nightcrawler. That's a big. I hold Nightcrawler's death.
That's fair.
Against it. So I also just don't think it's a very well written overall event, but that's also a big mark against it in my book. So take my review of Second Coming with whatever grain of salt you need to because of that, for sure.
That's fair, that's very fair. And I also just love. I loved Hope's story, and I feel like that's in a weird. Even though AVX is technically her culmination, I feel like Second Coming feels more like the culmination. It just is.
I need to go back and give it a reread with that in mind, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think we can guess, but who is your number 1?
My favorite character, Cyclops. Go read Uncanny X-Men number 175. That's all I'm going to say. I got to talk about Cyclops with Chris Claremont a couple of weeks ago as he was signing my copy of Uncanny X-Men number 175, and it was one of the greatest thrills of my life. The end. I've talked about Cyclops more than enough on this podcast over the last God knows how many years. So, Cyclops is the best. Cyclops is terrifically misunderstood. Go read Uncanny X-Men number 175. Maybe read 173 to 175. Give it a little bit of build-up. Beautiful Paul Smith art. Chris Claremont agrees with me that Cyclops is great, and that what happened in X Factor completely broke him as a character. I don't really have much beyond that. Everybody knows I love Cyclops. Do you have anything you want to say about Cyclops?
I like Cyclops. He is the father, kind of most of my favorite characters.
That's true.
So I have to respect the man. Like he played important roles. He played important roles in and a lot of members of my list on here. I like Cyclops. I think again he's one of those characters that if you think of the X-Men, much like Wolverine now, I think him and Wolverine are 1A, 1B, and that depends on who you're talking to on, like, when you think of X-Men, that's the 2 that kind of first come to mind for a lot of people, I think.
Absolutely. And that is one thing that I'll absolutely give Rosenberg. He definitely keyed in on the idea that if you're going to, and again, I ultimately think he would feel like he misses the point of the X-Men, but he definitely keyed in on the idea that the core of the team is these 2 men, and they're differing but mutually respectful ideologies.
Yeah. I think, again, going back to a lot of the greatest X-Men runs of recent years, a lot of them, even like Morrison, kind of had hints of that throughout, of like, these ideas versus these ideas. Even Uncanny X-Force, Wolverine and X-Men, a lot of these stuff all had that element to it. And I think that's a cool dichotomy for the X-Men have. And I think Cyclops is the perfect person to have that opposing but similar viewpoint.
Yeah. And then also, one of my absolute favorite moments in Cyclops and Wolverine history is, speaking of the Messiah, going all the way back to Messiah Complex, when Cyclops kind of pulls Wolverine aside and is like, that project we've talked about? You got permission. So basically, Cyclops and Wolverine have had a Wetworks team idea on the drawing board, just waiting for the right moment to pull it out. And I really, really love that Wolverine respects Cyclops enough not to just go off and do it, but to actually await the order, and that Cyclops is also enough of a realist to be like, eventually the X-Men are going to need to do shit that we can't have on the books, and I know exactly the man I need to go to make that happen. Yep. That is one of my all-time favorite exchanges between those 2 characters, and it's fucking brilliant.
Yep, nope, I agree. I love that exchange. I think it's written extremely well. I think that idea of that mutual respect the 2 have is such a cool concept that has kind of stayed through most of the major X-Men stories.
Right, exactly, and how it's grown from mutual dislike to grudging respect to genuine respect.
Well, my number one, I think for a lot of people, will be obvious now. And I also think a character that also has so much untapped potential right now that it's scary. A character that has had some of my all-time favorite stories in X-Men, and my number one is Quentin Quire, Kid Omega.
Called it.
Yeah, it was always going to be him. Him again. My top five are kind of interchangeable. It was probably more likely always going to be him or Cable. Riot of Xavier's is one of my all-time favorite X-Men stories. I loved to look at mutant culture and how mutants' existence would actually change culture and create its own fashion, its own drugs, its own everything. I thought it was such a fresh take on it. I think the dichotomy again of Wolverine and Quentin Quire from Wolverine and the X-Men was amazing and incredible. I think it's a character that, when put in the hands of people who know what they're doing, so far basically just Jason Aaron and Grant Morrison.
Disagree. Kelly Thompson used him phenomenally in West Coast Avengers. She just did not get a chance to really do much beyond her 10 issues.
I don't know. I was kind of, I don't know. I didn't hate how she used him. I didn't love it either. I don't know. I don't know. I'll put it this way. I think she did a good job. She honed in on elements of the character. I don't know. I think she made certain parts of the character seem more important than I think they are important to the character. But that's more of a personal thing.
Gotcha.
I think she honed in a lot more on like the self-obsession of the outward self-obsession and the almost reality obsession. Reality star obsession. I know that, but I also know that was a big kick of her book.
Right.
So,
I just like that he and Gwenpool kind of ended up hooking up. It was kind of a hate fucking relationship that I think was a really fun and interesting take on both characters. And I'm a huge Gwenpool fan.
That's true. And again, but we're hopefully on the brink of something cool happening because he's also involved in some of the upcoming X teams.
Yes.
So, God, please be. I loved his character. I love the idea of this Omega level, just typical punk radical kid that's trying to be edgy, trying to do stuff, has the power to back it up. Then gets in this weird mode where it goes too far, gets put in this odd spin animation, comes back, and then is semi-involved in the big Cyclops Wolverine fight, and at least causing it in a weird way. Then comes back again with an X-Men, although now for some reason looking about 10 years younger. And that's the one thing I was always like very odd of. Oh yeah, it's like they could not decide. Oh, after he's back from suspended brain animation, how old is he? He's 27. Really? Nope, he's still the same age. It's like, oh, okay. We're not really going to talk about that. It's just clearly how he's drawn and acts is very different.
Yeah. But I think that's also a change from being designed by Frank Quietly to being drawn by Chris Bacallo.
Yeah,
I feel like it's a huge part of that. This is my take on Quentin Quire.
Really quick, the weird thing, I want to say, wasn't the schism part of his introduction also written by Jason Aaron?
It was, yeah.
So that's why he's written different too. From like, if you compare Schism to Wolverine and the X-Men.
Gotcha.
He's written a much younger Wolverine X, which makes sense.
I honestly didn't even remember him being in Schism. I hate to say, but I hated Schism. I don't like so
Schism
much
either. But yeah, he's at that like in the first couple issues where it's like he like threatens to blow up or just something about that like big meeting. I can't even remember. Schism. Going back to the past 10 years, not a lot of great X-Men events.
No, not at all. Even though Schism did lead to some really great X-Men comics, the event itself.
Wolverine and the X-Men. Eventually because of that, but yeah, no, weird. But yes, your take on Quentin Quire.
I was shocked and kind of appalled that Quentin Quire was brought back after Riot at Xavier's because I felt like the character had served his purpose. I didn't know why, especially someone as talented as Jason Aaron, wanted to use Grant Morrison's more or less detritus as part of his new book. And then I read it. And there is something beautifully, ironically, post-punk about Quentin Quire because he's not quite the punk he thinks he is. He thinks he's The Clash when really he's Blink-182. And I kind of love that about him. And I find myself really enjoying more and more, or found myself really enjoying more and more of what I read of him and where I saw him and his continued evolution and the hints that he might also be a suitable host for the Phoenix Force, and how he took Betsy's psychic knife / katana and modified it because it's like, why didn't you ever do a shotgun? It's super simple. Stuff like that. It was really enjoyable.
Yeah.
Quire is a character I never expected to like, and he's ended up being a character that I get a genuine kick out of every time I see him, and that is not something I expected, especially from reading Right at Xavier's, where he is presented as a villain. He is presented as a bad guy, and Jason Aaron did a really tremendous job redefining and redeeming the character in a way that I did not expect. So, yeah, Quentin Quire has ended up being one of the more fascinating new mutants of the 21st century. And based on his initial appearance, I would have not have thought that the case. And yeah, he's fascinating. I appreciate him so much more than I ever thought I would.
I'm glad to hear, because that's a character again, ever since reading Riot, I've loved that character of Riot and Wolverine and the X-Men, and it's always been weird to me that there are several X-Men like this where they go in and out of being like clearly like set up to be, they're going to be some of the next main X-Men, but I think him along with the other people, whatever was the actual reason, the suffering of the X-Men comics of the past several years definitely hurt their development a ton of that next breed of main stage X-Men.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think was earmarked on the top of that list with several other people, and I'm hoping maybe we get back to that now of developing those characters, introducing new ones, because like you said earlier in the show, there's been so many characters that we have kept around from Morrison's run or from Wolverine the X-Men, and others that we just never hear from again, which is kind of odd. And the fact that we haven't really there was a moment after AVX where we started getting new mutants again, and up until House and Powers, we hadn't. And House of Powers was the first time in a long time where it's like, we're getting some new characters in this universe.
Yeah, exactly. And even the characters that we've really seen have technically not belonged to this universe.
Yeah.
They're part of Moira's Ninth Life, which we have established is definitely a previous universe. So we will see what continues to happen. Again, the X-Books for the first time in close to a decade are actually primed to be the forefront of Marvel again. Mm-hmm. And it's really wonderful that Marvel cares about these characters, the fans care about these characters, and Hickman very clearly cares about these characters and the story he's telling. So we remain thrilled, excited, and elated to see what's happening. Who are some of your favorite X-Men, and would you call some of our favorite X-Men bullshit? I am absolutely expecting some Jubilee haters to come out of the woodwork. I'm going to try to forestall that just by saying I totally get it. I'm as surprised as you are.
She's a vampire. Not anymore.
Tell us who your favorite X-Men are. Tell us who are maybe some of the picks that we picked that you might disagree with. We want to have those conversations with you. You can find us in the comments here on YouTube or on SoundCloud, wherever you're listening to us.
Yes.
You can find us in Facebook, facebook.com/blah blah podcast. You can find us over email, blahblahpodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter individually, where I am at blahblahpod.
I'm at HellhoundF5.
And I'm on Instagram at blahblahpodcast. You're at HellhoundF5 on Instagram as well, right?
That is true.
Awesome. Where you can actually see a Black Mirror hardcover that has been autographed by Scott Snyder, Jacques, and Francesca Francavilla.
Yes.
That Colby recently acquired, which is super awesome.
I've completed it now. Now I have my little Infinity Gauntlet Batman book that I just be very, very proud of.
That you will love and treasure forever,
yep,
as as you should. As always, thank you all so much for listening. We love doing these list shows. I know I keep saying it, but God, it feels like we're going to have a comics collision here pretty soon. Once we settle on who we want to collide, we really are about due for a collision. Unless maybe some major news hits next week.
He'd be good, but it's not a fair fight. But just their art style would be cool to compare. And I just want to read more right now because of that con. I want to read more Jacques and Mobius.
Yeah, honestly, I'm not well read enough on either of those. I'm familiar with both of their art styles. I'm not necessarily well read enough to make a genuine fight out of it. But yeah, we need to have another one soon. Actually, I think I may have just thought of one that might be really fascinating. We'll talk about it here in a second off mic. Thank you all so much for listening. Talk to us. Let us know what you think. And we'll hopefully talk to y'all next week.
Yes, hopefully. So long, everybody. Good night.
Night.